back, everybody, to the next Thomas & Friends VHS review. I think you guys are going to be pretty stoked for this next one because today is the anniversary of a very highly praised Thomas release. And that release is none other than 10 Years of Thomas. I adore this tape, and I'm sure many of you do as well. Of course, I needed a few volunteers to help me out, and I don't have not one, not two, but 9 special guests this time. Some familiar and some new faces. I'm excited. I know you guys are all excited. Let's dive into the history of 10 Years of Thomas. 10 Years of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends was originally released on VHS on September 14, 1999 by Anchor Bay Entertainment. As you know, this tape was to celebrate a decade of Thomas first being introduced to America, which was on January 29, 1989. This is also referred to as the air date when Shining Time Station's first episode premiered, which was A Place Unlike Any Other. It's a bit of a bummer because throughout the whole tape, the show is never even mentioned once. And it should be given at least a little credit because Thomas never would have made it to the States had it not been for Shining Time. Now, granted, I don't know how many of the kids featured on the tape even know of the show, but hey, who knows? Anyway, the tape was later released a few other times between 2000 and 2001. This included a variety of black and blue tapes ranging from sticker to ink labels. I distinctly remember owning this particular sticker label when I was little, and I do currently have another in my personal collection. I kind of prefer these labels, to be honest, because the bold text just pops and you have that little Thomas print on the side. Wish all the US tapes had this. Then, on July 24th, 2001, Anchor Bay released the tape again, and then sometime in 2004, the tape was released one final time. Should also be noted that a tin bank was also released for some of these releases, although I'm not exactly sure what year this came out. And I know I've seen a few of them pop up online, but if you're looking to get it, be prepared to pay a pretty penny to get it. A year later, on August 23, 2005, came the first DVD release by Anchor Bay Hit Entertainment. In 2007 and 2008, the DVD was released with a Sounds of Sodor cover. I don't know what it is, but I actually really like these covers. Well, not all of them. And finally, sometime in 2009, the DVD was released once more by Lionsgate. Also want to throw this out there, but this DVD during some time ended up winning 2 Parents' Choice Awards. Of all the releases they probably could have chosen, this was a wise choice. Let's not forget you can also find 10 Years of Thomas with multiple wooden railway packs, even Ertl and Take and Play, 2 DVD box sets, the Totally Thomas Volume 7 pack, the Ultimate Thomas Collection, and the Best Tales on the Tracks DVD set. Alright, history out of the way, let's take a look at the episodes. So 10 Years of Thomas features 10 different stories from Season 1 to Season 4, all narrated once again by the amazing George Carlin. Our story stops are Thomas and Bertie's Great Race, Old Iron, The Trouble with Mud, Terrence the Tractor, Percy's Ghostly Trick, Mavis, Henry and the Elephant, Percy's Promise, James Goes Buzz Buzz, and All at Sea. So how this is going to work is, I'm not going to be introducing each story along with the person associated, as I want to keep most of these special guests as a surprise. And once we get to the end, I've also left the Thomas Anthem Grand Finale optional to anyone who wishes to speak their part on it, and all of the final thoughts will go in the same order as the episodes, barring my part as I will go last to close everything out. And you'll also see in between the interviews that I might have squeezed in a couple of little surprises here and there. Okay, rules aside, let's begin with our first episode.
Yes. What a perfect way to start this release. This might be a bit controversial, but I think Thomas and Bertie's Great Race, or just Thomas and Bertie, is my personal favorite episode in Season 1. I know a lot of people would say The Flying Kipper, and while I do think that is an incredible episode, this one is just so much fun. Thomas and Bertie's chemistry is just iconic, and this is something that the show went on to do for the rest of the series. This just shows how iconic the story really is. I mean, hell, they basically almost redid this whole episode as the classic series finale, 3 Cheers for Thomas. That is a perfect example of how great the story is. The episode is just also very quickly paced. The opening introduces Bertie and gets straight into the point. The race was honestly quite intense for me as a child. For 1 minute, Thomas was in front, then Birdie was in front, and it just went back to back. I love how they also have to be in situations where they have to stop, whether it's through a gate, a signal, dropping off passengers, or not even able to climb over hills. To me, that's what makes the story a little bit more interesting, as if it was just them racing and not going through moments like that, I don't think it would have been as good. It honestly adds a bit more story, and that's honestly the one thing that I love about it. But my favorite thing about this episode is the music itself. It is no secret that Mike and Junior are incredible composers, and their work on Thomas will always be memorable. This is easily one of my favorite pieces of work that they have done. It is upbeat, catchy, fast-paced, and I either always bounce my leg or I just nod my head back and forth vibing to the music. I know it's just Birdie's theme, but it's easily one of my favorites. I especially love when they add like Birdie's horn thrown into certain bits of the theme, and to me, that's just what tops it all. The ending of this episode is honestly very rewarding and quite sweet. The fact that Thomas won the race and yet the passengers cheered for both Thomas and Birdie makes it just very, very nice, and even if Birdie lost, he still tried. I also love the fact that Birdie wasn't even upset about losing the race either, but instead gave Thomas a good one-liner of being an airplane, which is honestly one of my favorite parts in the song Let's Have a Race. The ending just wraps up things super nicely and it satisfies me. The fact that they become great friends after just a race, to me, is just very iconic and honestly quite nice. And I've always loved that last line of dialogue.
So although, between you and me, they would like to have another race, I don't think they ever will. Do you?
Overall, I think Thomas and Birdie is a very fantastic episode, and I think that this was a perfect way to start the release off as a whole, and has become a favorite of mine for season 1. The rating I give it is a perfect 10 out of 10.
I think railroading in general just amazes kids of all ages. I mean, I was a rail fanatic as a young child and still am today. That's why I'm working here. But it's just the size of the equipment and, of course, Thomas itself being having the big happy face in the front. I mean, kids are just enamored with him around the world, not just here.
What do you think about Edward?
What he fell He looks like Thomas and Gordon put together.
Would you believe of all the ones I'd have to do, it would be this one? Because, believe it or not, this is the only episode on this release that I've actually not talked about yet. So it was kind of a win-win for me. What can I really say about this episode other than it's fantastic? It's a very fun chase, race, rescue, and runaway.
Hey, wait a minute.
All wrapped up into one hell of an exciting story. It really goes without question why this episode is a fan favorite. For one, Edward and James's personalities bounce off each other amazingly, with Edward obviously much wiser than he's given credit for, and James, while young, prances about thinking he's above everyone else, which inevitably lands him in trouble most of the time. And even though Edward has gained more respect from him, I just find it amazing how James is always back and forthing his opinions on Edward, and I say that because after this episode, he's right back to disrespecting him in Edward's exploit, and so on and so forth. I don't know why they had to continue that little retcon. That was always kind of a small bother to me, but that's besides the point. I think what really makes this story so great and why fans love it so much is how we see Edward actually prove his worth. Because most of the time he does get the shit end of the stick, and when opportunity knocks, he shows everyone that he's not just some old fuddy-duddy who can't hold his own, but that he's just as useful as the rest of the bunch. Edward may not be a personal favorite character of mine, but I think I'm beginning to understand why there are so many fans out there that appreciate what kind of character he is. Overall, I have nothing else left to say that hasn't already been said. Story is amazing, the model work is beautiful, of course you have that oh-so runaway theme that everybody loves. Yeah, again, it's amazing. I promised myself I was not going to be super biased sounding, but I think this episode deserves to be ranked a 10 out of 10. I see no issues with it, and it's no wonder why this episode is so highly praised.
It's a really useful engine, you know. All the other engines, they'll tell you so. He huffs and whistles, rushing to and fro. He's the really useful engine we adore. He's the one, he's the one. He's the really useful engine that we adore. He's the one, he's the number one. Thomas the Tank Engine.
What I like about Gordon is he gets stuck. Is he can't go up the hill with freight cars. Here's the big ones.
Right.
And I guess one time he was slowing down. He's like, uh-oh, you know. And then he's like, and we were going so well too. I like him because he's like really big, and whenever whenever there's something wrong, he always changes it into something jolly kind of.
I find it weird, but also very fitting how, for a VHS tape made to celebrate 10 years of Thomas and Friends, at least in the land of the not-so-free healthcare, they chose to include one of the 2 episodes from Series 3 that suffered the most from its Railway series counterparts being rewritten. The trouble with Mud troubles me. While I understand they had to make this story a self-contained episode because they had skipped it back when they did Off the Rails and Down the Mine in Series 1, the changes they made kinda ruined Gordon's character. Why isn't he bothered about looking clean for the Express? I don't know if you've noticed, but he has pulled this train before. Surely he should know that it's a dignified job that he has to look his best for, right? He complained about pulling dirty trucks before, so he does care about his image. He should care about his image. All I know is that what was once a significant step for his character development in the books is now a story that portrays him as being a petulant child who doesn't want to take a bath even though they look and smell like crap. At the same time though, and maybe this is my Series 3 bias kicking in, but I still like the episode. The gag with Gordon wishing mud all over James is funny.
Bah, said Gordon, and angrily let off steam.
The shot of Gordon running through Henry's forest with the autumn aesthetic is very pretty. The set design in general is full of Series 3's dazzling, bold colours, even with the drizzly weather throughout the episode. And despite the drastic change to the beginning and end of the story, at least the other 75% plays out exactly the same as in the books. You know, the leaves making Gordon's hill hard to climb, James turning into Michael Jackson as he slides down it, and Gordon giving him some help as he pushes behind. It's still mostly the same story, just with a controversial change. Other than that, the music is brilliant as always. George Carlin's narration, while he forgets to pause sometimes when reading the lines, he still sounds great. And admittedly, I do prefer the name change to The Trouble with Mud. Because before it was like, okay, it's a story where James slips on leaves covering Gordon's hill, what do we call it? Leaves. Genius. Not my go-to Series 3 episode, but enjoyable nonetheless. 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I like about parents stuck in snow. And he's an orange tractor that plows fields. And I remember once he was helping an engine.
I've known about the episode Terrence the Tractor for almost my entire life, and it might be the quintessential episode of Thomas. Everything in this episode hits on the very best marks of the entire show. From the beautiful seasonal visuals of autumn and winter, to the music and the wit of the Reverend W. Awdry's writing, when I think of Thomas the Tank Engine, this is the very first episode that comes to my mind. Its inclusion on this tape is a very smart choice, because it is definitely one of the all-time classics of the TV show. I'd summarize the plot for y'all, but given that this is a Thomas review, I'm gonna assume that there is like a 99.9% chance that you've seen this episode just as many times as I have. The opening shot of the leaves blowing in the foreground and the church in the background in and of itself is a visual masterpiece. But it doesn't even compare to how beautiful the snowy sets are. Nearly all of the shots have a sprinkle of magic upon them. And the snow shots in particular, for the most part, look impeccably realistic, except for the one where you can clearly see Thomas is about to crash into the end of the set. Seriously, Thomas.
Get out of there!
Thomas refusing to wear his snowplow is almost like a small child refusing to wear their big coat when their mom tells them to go out and play in the snow, and it works really well. My mother has always said to me, if you don't listen, you will feel. And this story is probably the best encapsulation of this message presented throughout the entire run of the series. What else can I say about this episode that hasn't already been stated? It's my favorite of season 1, it's iconic and quotable as hell, and its visuals, music, and story are some of the best of the entire series. And if you're a fan, it will probably be etched into your brain for the rest of your life. For the very first time in this review series, I am proud to present an episode with a perfect 10 out of 10 score. Undeniably a timeless Thomas treasure.
We have all the trains. Every time they have a birthday, they ask for a Thomas the Tank Engine train. One of the trains, we have Donald, then we have the milk truck, and Terrence. What are the trains? We have Percy, Coldy, Scarlowy.
Henry, Gordon, James, Henry, Thomas, James.
Let's go get food.
Thomas. Percy. What Percy does, he backs up, backs forward, backs down, backs up, backs forward, backs down. That's what's happening to Percy. Percy helps Thomas carry a load because they're best friends.
Who knew a simple story of playing a spooky prank would be the setting stone for future scary stories of the series? Ghost Train, known as Percy's Ghostly Trip in the States, while not as out there or intense as, say, any of the spooky episodes from Series 5, still delivers on that scary atmosphere that Thomas the Tank Engine would master in. It only makes sense to include this episode on a tape that celebrates Thomas's impact on American pop culture, for it is without a doubt a quintessential episode. I find it clever in its inclusion as well. You have other fun, happy-go-lucky stories, then they throw in this scary one. It's a great way to show how much of a mood shift the show can be. Also, I wish we had DVDs like this in Australia. It would have been so great to have a DVD that showed Thomas's impact on Australian pop culture. Lucky Yanks. The opening shot alone lets the viewers know that this is going to be a scary one, with the viaduct and the work gear casting their silhouette amongst the mist and fog. The only light shining on them is the moon. The bassy hum of the music building up with the whistle in the distance. Then of course, the perfect pache of the famous theme from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho.
Every year, on the date of the accident, it runs again as a warning to others, plunging into the gap, shrieking like a lost soul.
So what happens in this episode? Thomas isn't impressed with a ghost story that Percy tells him and Toby at the quarry. Disappointed, Percy goes about his duties until he runs into a lime cart left by Sam the farmer. Now I know what you're thinking. Wrong Sam, it wasn't me, okay? After seeing Percy, Toby teams up with him and decides to go gremlin mode on Thomas by giving him a good scare, which leaves Thomas rather traumatized by the event. While Percy and Toby, they laugh it off at their successful scaring of their friend. Is it any wonder why this episode is loved by fans? Again, it isn't the spookiest one, but it fits perfectly as a Series 2 episode. As Series 2 amped up the action from Series 1, and it was definitely a taste of what was yet to come for the show. Having a fantastic build-up all the way to when they scare Thomas, leaving us with one of the funniest moments in the show. Now, I don't often rate things as I find it hard to do, but if I was to give this episode a rating out of 10, I'd say a good 9 out of 10 from me.
All of the children came to say goodbye. They clapped and cheered as Toby rang his bell. Bye-bye. Everyone was sad to see them go. Whatever will they do? And where will they go? Suddenly news came to brighten up their day. How Toby and Henrietta were needed right away. The theft controller had written to say, could they please come and help right away? Now they're part of his family forever.
Yes, Toby. Toby got thirsty. He drank his drink, and then he got more thirstier. He had no more else water, cause he drank it all. And that's the end of the story.
This was a nice story to include in the collection. I think a lot of older Thomas fans, especially the ones that grew up with this tape, can understand what it's like to resent an older figure that stifles your creativity, only to realize they may have been right about a few things once you land yourself in trouble. We've all been humbled at one point or another, which makes Mavis's experience quite relatable. With that said, you need to watch Toby's Tightrope to see that Mavis's desires to see more of the island and have more responsibility are valid and deserve to be recognized. I'm happy for her. You go, girl. The lesson is great, and the tension between Mavis and Toby is well done. Although, it doesn't help when Diesel shows up and adds to the tension, making things out to be a steam engines versus diesel engines issue, rather than a simple disagreement on how sidings should be organized. Now Mavis believes everything Toby tells her isn't worth listening to, which of course leads to a humorous railway incident.
But Mavis had stopped in the wrong place. Instead of taking Toby's advice, she had given the cars the chance they wanted. Hold back, they cried. Grrr up, ordered Mavis. The cars just laughed and her wheels spun helplessly.
While it's always great to see Diesel, he wasn't originally in this story. In the Railway series, it's actually Daisy in Diesel's role, and her stance about Toby is not as malicious. Despite the line, anything steam engines can do, we diesels can do better, is said by both characters. Daisy telling Mavis that diesels can do better is just ignorant. Daisy had to be forced to pull one van. She doesn't shunt or work in the quarry. She has no experience doing the things Mavis does. She's not coming from a malicious place though, as I think she just wanted to make Mavis feel better. Sometimes you and the homie have to meet for coffee and trash everyone at your job so you can get it out of your system and go back to work the next day. Diesel's influence on Mavis has a much different connotation though. He came to the railway and believed he was superior to all simply by being a diesel, so he refused to listen to Duck, and of course, a humorous railway incident occurred. If you include Diesel in this story, the audience already knows that Diesel is in the wrong, but Mavis doesn't. I think it would have been satisfying for Mavis to see Diesel again. By the end of Toby's Tightrope, she's grown so much as a character. And if Diesel is still randomly lurking around the island spewing this crap, he clearly hasn't learned anything. Since Diesel's deviousness isn't followed up on, I personally would have preferred Daisy in this role. I'm aware that some of the producers didn't like how Daisy's character was presented in Season 2, but it would have been great to see the Branchline gals vent about Toby, even if that scene wouldn't exactly pass the Bechdel test. In the end, I'd give this episode an 8 out of 10. And Diesel, to quote that angry farmer, you can take that stupid Steamies vs. Diesel rhetoric and shove it right up your...
To a land where the sky is so blue, a storybook land of wonder, a magical island just waiting for you. Island of Sodo will make your dreams come true.
Henry couldn't get out of the tunnel.
Why?
Because he was stuck. Because there was bricks in the back and bricks in the front, and he couldn't get out. He mainly does like silly things, and he like plays tricks on Thomas.
I enjoy this episode, but I think the intro is a bit forced. The fact that they took it out of place and tried to sort of shoehorn it into the whole tender engine striking series. And Thomas going on his branch line at the beginning definitely feels very forced. The engines bickering, the whole plot convenience of James calling Henry a clown.
I'm not afraid of getting wet anymore, huffed Henry. Anyway, you look silly enough to be a clown. You should join the circus.
And then Percy coming in and saying, there's a circus in town.
So you've heard the news? What news? About the circus.
After that, it's great. I love the rolling stock, the lovely circus train, and then the music, especially the busy theme with Top and Matt's theme. That's awesome. And I enjoy the Henry tunnel bit.
It began to push the train backwards. Out of the tunnel came Henry, then the cars, and last of all, a large, cross elephant. Well, I never, cried the foreman. The workman gave him some cake. He drank 3 buckets of water and was just about to drink another when Henry let off steam. Cried the elephant. Water went all over Henry. Poor Henry.
I think that they could have done this in the first series. I don't think it was insurmountably difficult. I guess they had gained confidence with their stop motion. And I think they were really starved for standard gauge episodes in series 4, so they were kind of going back, which is okay, but yeah, it makes some of these a bit awkward. I just watched Paint Pots and Queens, which follows this episode, and they did not awkwardly try to take it out of context, and they honored the original Down the Mine story, and that flowed just way better. Then, end of the episode, still a bit Britt Allcrofty saccharine, but good. I'm going to give it, I think, a solid 7.5.
Do you think I have a favorite? Oh goodness, I can't even think. There's so many stories. They're beautiful stories. It's just, and I like the things that the stories have to say. They have a very important point.
It gives them an opportunity to learn something that's meaningful, and it puts everyday situations into a format that they can understand. And you know, a lot of good lessons for life are learned through the Thomas series.
Now Harold works all day. He flies all around and up in the whole sky up there. And that's what he does because he likes doing that. And you know why? Why? Because he likes that. Tank engines get lost in some sort of place, and then Harry looks, are you all right? And then they say, we're lost, so he flies back and tells them that he's lost, and they say, Sir Top and Matt that he's lost, and then they try to go out and look for him. He's a helicopter, and he's a helicopter, and he flies. He flies.
I really liked this one as a kid, and watching it now, it has easily become one of my favourite episodes of Series 3. Visually, it is stunning, with the rain effects and the flooded piece of urine on the track, which looks a whole lot better than Edward's exploit. Not that I'm saying that Edward's exploit is bad, I just don't think that episode was really meant for Series 2. But anyway, back to Percy's promise. Even the beginning of the episode looks beautiful, with the watermill sets and the coastal track. The storm theme that Mike and Junior composed for this episode is great.
Percy struggled on past coastal villages and into the countryside. The river was rising fast.
Percy and Harold's banter in this episode is always fun to watch, and George Carlin's narration is absolutely wonderful. Although I will say, and I know this sounds biased, but I do prefer Michelangelo's narration of this episode. If there's one thing I will say about this episode that I'm not a fan of, and I know this applies to like the early versions of this episode, I just can't get used to this episode with the missing music. It just feels very incomplete to me. But other than that, this episode is a timeless classic. If you have no idea what Thomas is, and you want to check out an episode from Series 3, this is a perfect episode to go for. 10 out of 10.
Sometimes it's nice to take some time out. Do what you really want to do. Just to relax and let the world fly by you. Forget your worries, no need to hurry. Just leave a sign to say. Gone fishing, gone fishing. It's a sunny day and you're on your way. Gone fishing, gone fishing, gone fishing. It's a sunny day and you're on your way. Why don't we all go fishing?
The cars were pushing him around. He's like, I'm going too fast. They're pushing me.
Right.
And then he was just going so fast, it just like caught on fire on and then I guess there was a big turn, and then he like went, and then he went into like a cow's field. Because the wheels were like coming off, so like they couldn't make a turn. James,
What happened?
a bee stung him. Once a bee stung me.
James Goes Buzz Buzz. A classic episode. What else can I say about it? Hell, the people introducing this episode barely did. They said, what, 2 words at best?
James,
What happened?
a bee stung me.
This episode had countless merchandise, like Take-Along, Wooden Railway, Trackmaster, and was released on 4 releases. I've seen this episode countless times, quote it verbatim, almost, and remade it with my wooden trains. Twice. Honestly, this episode, in terms of, like, quotability, like, I can quote this verbatim. And hell, like, the special effects, like, I always thought it was the coolest thing to see, like, a cartoon bee on live action. Something about live action and, like, 2D just, like, mix really well, especially, you know, Roger Rabbit and, like, Space Jam. But that's besides the point. The episode itself is quotable as hell. It's funny as like, this episode, there's so many good moments. If I had to pick one of my favorite episodes, it would definitely be this one. Just because there's so many good little moments in this episode, like the bee stinging James.
So it stung James right back on the nose. Eee! Whistled James. He had had enough. So had his fireman and driver.
James just all around being a dick to everyone.
What's that, Duck? Are you afraid of bees? They're only insects after all, so don't let that buzzbox Diesel tell you different. His name is Boko, and he didn't. I wouldn't care if hundreds were swarming around. I'd just blow smoke and make them buzz off.
It's just really funny. Overall, I would rate James Goes Buzz Buzz an 8 out of 10.
Duck, as I'm gonna one because I like him. Because he's a good one because I like him. No, I like him
What?
because he's a favorite engine of all in the world. Quack, quack.
Wow, wow, and wow. If someone could explain a near-perfect episode of Thomas the Tank Engine, this would be it. I say near because there is only just a small number of episodes that I have a personal preference for. Every aspect of All at Sea is mesmerising in the most charming and loving way. Every time I think of it, I get a strong sense of comfort just knowing of its existence. Duck and Percy's dynamic is amazing in this episode. It brings forward Duck's imaginative and creative ways of thinking by dreaming of places in the world beyond the island of Sodor. It's exactly the mindset of somebody who is more adventurous and wanting to roam the big wide world out there. As for Percy, we all know and love him for his innocence in most situations, and that presents itself here by him counteracting Duck's wishes and showcasing somebody who is more comfortable to remain in familiar surroundings. The scenery among the episode is breathtaking. The soundtrack is absolutely superb. So many memorable ditties and themes occur. It's all bundled up in one big gift of joy. It just makes me so damn happy. My interpretation of the story of All at Sea is that you have to accept that not everything you desire to do will be a reality to you, but it also does not discourage you from dreaming of those things in the first place. It's like it's okay to dream and let your imagination go wild with bizarre ideas, but, you know, we all have to remind ourselves that we can only do so much and that there are limits. See, I try not to read too deeply into things such as Thomas because, by God, I know of people who have come up with all these bizarre and strange theories regarding characters and stories. However, doing episode reviews such as these, I kind of have to dissect the stories and characters to really make a point, other than this episode is good, but also find that balance to approach writing a review to avoid sounding like a complete raving lunatic. Rant over. Now, do I even need to say anything about the final scene? Do I really? I can't even fathom how a silly little children's show about trains who talk could make me so emotional on these levels. I don't want to sound sappy, but it's true. The scene makes me feel a mix of warm, comforting happiness and nostalgic sadness. It reminds me of the beauty and glee of being a child watching it, but also kind of sorrowful because I know I'm never getting those times back. That's why I always think of the quote, "Don't be sad it's over, smile because it happened." I know, I went there. I went deep. I tried not to, but I don't know how else I could have described this scene without getting sentimental. Also, it's even more emotional now knowing our boys Michael Angelis and George Carlin are on the other side now. Rest in peace, you absolute legends. I promise you all, my next review will not be as deep as this one, but All at Sea just makes me feel shit, man. It sits very comfortably in my top 20 favourite episodes of the entire show. It goes without saying, All at Sea, 10 out of 10.
Duck still wonders about the lands beyond the horizon.
But he enjoys being with friends most of all, and I think he knows that sometimes
the best travels are those we can only dream about.
Don't you?
Admittedly, this was the first time in years I've listened to the official version of Thomas's anthem. I'm so used to Headmaster Hastings' version. And upon revisiting it for this video, I don't really have much to say other than it being a good song, but I'm gonna try anyway. For a song to close off a compilation of episodes celebrating 10 years of Thomas, hell yeah, you couldn't have picked a better song for the occasion. One that sings about why we love Thomas and his friends. It's tailor-made for something like this. As a song in general, it's a beautiful tune, if a bit simple in terms of lyrics. I know it's Thomas the Tank Engine here, I'm not expecting an in-depth, multi-layered lyrical song about talking choo-choo trains. It's just that with the words like chugga chugga chug chug, chuff chuff chuff, and he chugga chugga chuff chuffs, it just seems a bit too simple. It's just, yeah, feels like we're leaning a bit into the hit era level of song quality there. Thomas's anthem is the Sonic the Hedgehog 1 of Thomas songs, as in there are definitely other songs to come after it that do a much better job, but it doesn't make it any less of a classic, and a staple to the era of everyone's favourite Blue Tank Engine.
This is easily one of the most unique and best releases of all time. The fact that they went out of their way to make a 10th anniversary release like this is something that I just mad respect. I don't know if this release has gotten some criticism over time, and that's totally fine. I would like to know if there's some people that aren't a fan of this one. But in my opinion, it's just too iconic. Yeah, it was re-released to shit between 1999 all the way up to 2009. I still think that this is definitely worth picking up. For an anniversary release, this could not be any more perfect. I mean, come on, man, it's got mostly Season 3 episodes on here, and Season 3 is the best. Especially if you compare it to, say, the UK's Your Favorite Story collection, this is miles better. There's even some people I know that might agree that this release is better than that, and this is coming from people that probably live in the UK. I mean, that release has no Season 3 episodes. That's just sad. I love the variety of stories on here too. They're honestly all great ones. The release starts off and ends perfectly. I know it's not technically a perfect release because what the kids are saying sometimes don't add up to the episodes themselves, but I still think that they did a great selection of episodes. These kids know what good Thomas is. But honestly, what makes this release more special to me was because I actually remember seeing like the Thomas that they filmed at Strasbourg. But this wasn't at Strasbourg when I seen it, it was actually in Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan. But like I said, this is an incredible release. For a special 10th anniversary release, they went all out. I give this release a solid 10 out of 10. I highly recommend it.
This is an excellent tape. It's a superb balance of exciting episodes with chases, races and runaways, and some stories that provide great humour either with something silly like an engine getting stung by a bee, or just great back and forth banter like Toby and Mavis or the big engines in Henry and the Elephant, before concluding with one of the most heartfelt episodes in the whole series, really making you feel like you've been on a journey throughout this tape, being honest. The episode selection not only randomizes the order so we're not just watching them in release order, but the episode choices really show off the model work and direction of this era greatly, though personally I think one or two more Series 4 episodes would have shown off more of the very best of the model work, but then this tape is half Series 3 episodes, so that makes up for it. This was also my first time listening to George Carlin as a narrator for a lot of these episodes, and he's nice to listen to. He forgets to pause where he reads certain lines, making things feel a bit jumbled, but at least having one consistent voice across the whole tape makes the 10 Years of Thomas tape just that, consistent. He outdoes Ringo on many occasions in terms of energy, but Michelangelis is still my go-to. For a 10-year celebration, it's a neat little reminder as to how special the world of these colourful talking trains is to us. It makes you proud to be a Thomas fan, which is something I can't say for a lot of celebratory Thomas tapes and DVDs. I'm looking at you, first-class fucking stories. Cheers for inviting me to this, Tay, and I'll see you all in a bit.
10 Years of Thomas was my very first Thomas tape, and it's partially because of this very release that I'm here talking about Thomas to this very day. And there's a good reason for that. The collection of episodes on this tape is probably the best of any US release, and it is so close to reaching perfection that it's a shame that I have to mention the Strasbourg interviews. The interviews in between the episodes with parents and kids and that one random conductor guy are so stilted and honestly a chore to sit through. Even with all of the nostalgia I may have for this tape, they kind of deter me from watching it from now and then. Not to mention, they're pretty weird sometimes too.
And so, when he came out and he was a boy, we named him Thomas.
Thomas is colorful, he's bright, he's fast, he's blue.
We have the milk truck and Terrence. What are the trains? We have Percy.
Caldy, Scarlowy, Mr. Snowman. Ha! You thought I wasn't gonna bring that up again, did you, Tay?
Fuck off!
Interviews aside, though, this is still an essential piece, not just for Thomas media collectors, but for Thomas fans in general. I can't recommend it enough.
Like I said in my review of Percy's Ghostly Trick, why didn't we get a release like this in Australia? You Americans definitely got lucky. I think overall, this is a fantastic release. From having the intervals being kids and their parents being interviewed about what Thomas means to them and their families, but it also has a fantastic choice of episodes. At first, the selection might throw you off. I mean, it did me at first. One complaint I used to see about this release back in the day was that some fans were like, oh, the kids talk about this thing and then it goes into an episode that doesn't relate to them. Or, this kid got it wrong. Well, guys, calm down. They're kids, okay? Can't expect them to remember everything, like in perfect detail, come on. But again, it's fantastic that a release like this exists because it shows the importance that Thomas the Tank Engine has had on American pop culture. And this is a perfect time capsule of when Thomas was an absolute giant in the American zeitgeist. But they end up flowing so well and probably some of the best choices for a release like this. And what better way to end a release like this than with the first banger song from the show, Thomas's Anthem. I mean, the song itself is already catchy from the get-go, but having it bookend a momentous release like this is just honestly a genius choice. I can't picture any other song being chosen. All in all, this release is absolutely fantastic.
I thought 10 Years of Thomas was a great collection of stories. Fan favorites Thomas, Percy, and James are featured heavily, with Edward, Henry, Gordon, Toby, and Duck getting some spotlight too. It was nice to see that Mavis made the cut. There weren't many female leads during this era, and Mavis as a character was probably the best choice they had at the time. As entertaining as Daisy was, she was a bit of a diva, and we only got to see Caroline on one of her really bad days. I think to improve the lineup, Toby's tightrope should have been used, seeing as it portrays Mavis in a better light. We see her mature, and she also has a heroic moment of rescuing Toby over the bridge. That episode would have been a better way to show her at her best, especially in a collection of stories meant to serve as a celebration of the characters. I'd also like to say that All at Sea was such a great note to end on. This tape was the only way I could watch this episode when I was younger, and sometimes I'd pop in this tape just so I could watch this episode. The story has so much to say about our journeys in life, and how being able to dream about such things can be as fulfilling as being where we are, doing the things we are meant to do. That story has stuck with me for a while, and its placement at the end of this collection was a nice touch.
I think I've got to admit something with this release. I've never watched this whole thing. I know, I'm a fake fan, but hear me out. From the Bits and Pizza. Yeah, originally when this release came out, it had a slice of pizza with it. From the bits and pieces I've seen of this release, it's very good. Much better than your favourite story collection from the UK. Because the intermission segments with the children is actually presentable, being at a Day Out with Thomas event, and not just a dingy room full of Thomas merchandise that makes you feel weirdly uncomfortable, and almost feels like analog horror found footage. Maybe that's just me. When I get round to watching this release in its entirety, I'm pretty sure I won't be disappointed. All of these episodes are certified bangers, and not to mention, it's a perfect mix. Unlike the UK equivalent, which is almost completely full of Ringo Starr Series 1 and 2, and only one Michelangelo's episode being from Series 4. And what the f***? No Series 3?
In the bin!
But forget that release, we're talking about 10 Years of Thomas. I've heard very good things about this release, so when I actually watch it, I'm bound to have an excellent time.
As for the release itself, the episode choices are good, and it's a neat time capsule of 90s Thomas. Having the wraparound segments introduced in the episodes is a very unique idea. Also, as a kid, I always wondered if they ever would make a sequel to this, like 20 Years of Thomas, or 30, or so on and so on. God, could you imagine if there was a 50 Years of Thomas? Oh my god. Overall, would I recommend you getting this? Absolutely. Like, if you are a Thomas collector, and you don't have this, what are you doing? What are you doing? Come on.
That was short.
Overall, this release is absolute gold. I'm honestly jealous that we never got this here in the UK. The intermission footage with the kids at Day Out with Thomas radiates so much childhood magic for me, as I was once in their shoes when I went to those myself, and having the pleasure to meet who I thought was the real Thomas in the flesh. The episode choices are immaculate. Half of the episodes on here are in my top 20 favourites overall, and even the others are great as well. Such amazing picks. Thomas's Anthem Grand Finale is a fun little reprise of the original song. The medley of footage from all the many other seasons was a better choice to make overall, since it broadens the showcase of all the characters and more like appropriate shots to use for them also. I can safely say, after owning every single mainstream classic series release from the US, this is my favourite one, hands down. It makes me so joyful and appreciative to be a fan of our favourite Cerulean Blue Tank Engine. I'm amazed how this release has been out now for 25 years, and now the TV show's turning 40 soon. Like what? 10 out of 10. Simply the best one from the States. Thank you so much, Tay, for choosing me for this fantastic collaboration with all these amazing people. It was an absolute pleasure.
Right alongside the Gallant Old Engine, this is my other favorite Thomas tape. I have a lot of nostalgia with this one, as this was one of many that I would love to watch constantly. Which I think is a bit ironic, seeing as how there are 2 episodes on here that terrified me as a kid. But that obviously didn't stop me. Sort of similar to Matt, I've been to Strasbourg at least once when I was very little, but my family wasn't exactly there for the Day Out with Thomas event. We were just kind of walking around. I will say this, even though I didn't get to ride him, I can at least say that I've seen the locomotive they used for Thomas on the tape, and he looked amazing up close. Here's something else that's kind of nuts. The filming for the interviews didn't start until May of '99, and I was there a year prior. It may sound crazy, but to think, if my family would have waited maybe one more year, there could have been that slight possibility that I could have been interviewed, or maybe end up in the background somewhere. So close, I was so close, but oh well. Anyway, back to the release. This tape has a phenomenal lineup of episodes that are the perfect way to celebrate Thomas's anniversary. The amount of tone differences you have for each episode not only has such a unique balance, but each one seems to bounce off one another with ease for a compilation tape, even if half the episodes on here are from Season 3. You've got races, runaways, spooks, hilarious antics, even heartstring pullers. What more could you ask for? And they couldn't have picked a better choice than to have Thomas's Anthem close off the tape, and this is where we really get to celebrate everything that was given to us between seasons 1 to 4. By the end of it all, this release makes me so proud to be a Thomas fan. You can just see how much of an impact this adorable blue tank engine has had on so many families, and he continues to do so to this day. Now, granted, the show is not as good as it used to be, but it's nice to look back on tapes like this, relive your childhood, and just think back to a time when Thomas was at its peak. Like so many of these reviewers have already stated, this is by far the best VHS to come from the States. Truly a timeless classic. And that's going to conclude this review. I want to thank all my special guests for joining me on this amazing review, and I want to thank all of you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more reviews and other Thomas-related content. And be sure to check out my previous reviews in the playlist down below in the description. Before I go, I just want to say that I am so grateful to have such wonderful fans who enjoy my work, and I have every intention to continue these, but for now, I'm going to be taking a very long and well-deserved break from these, as this was my biggest video yet. And I would also like to focus my energy on some other videos that I did promise to do this year, but haven't gotten around to doing any of them. Don't worry though, I still have some Thomas videos planned out, as the show anniversary is also coming up soon. I am going to try and do some more of the single reviews, and as a matter of fact, Ryan and Daisy, while it should be out, is still currently in the works, but I will have it out soon. And I also want to try and drop out a couple of new Theodore videos, as those have been very scarce recently. So I will be continuing these reviews sometime in November, and I still have yet to decide what my next one will be. But be sure to keep a lookout for what I've got planned from here on out. Once more, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.